I picked up it, paperback, beat up paperback from the library when I was in 5th grade. I was way too young to read it, I think, but boy did I read it, and it completely changed the way I looked at the world. It terrified me in a way that I, in 5th grade, had never been scared, but also made me feel empowered. And it started this experience that I've had with so much of your work, where getting through the anxiety of being afraid while reading a story taught me, who was a very scared kid, how to be brave in short bursts, in short increments, and it became exercise of character for me to get through the books, and so I became a constant reader, and then struggled my way into somehow a career where people would pay for me to make movies, which is still crazy to me, and now I'm sitting here next to you, which is also completely surreal.
By taking Dan Torrance's story as a grown-up and filtering it through his own apparently large heart, Mike has been able to take the Kubrick movie, I think, a step further so that it warms things up. People are going to compare this to The Shining, and they're going to say, this is, going back and trying to reheat leftovers and all the rest of it, and that the sequel is just a blatant opportunity to try and ride on the coattails of a book that was a big success and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So you have to cope with all that stuff and kind of put it out of your mind and say, this is what I'm doing. The story should stand on its own, as its own thing. And Mike's movie stands on its own, as its own thing. And it has its own excitement and its own rewards, apart from all the stuff that it brings with it. But again, I think the stuff that it brings with it, it could have been baggage if somebody had done it that it wasn't good, but instead it's a dividend. It enriches. And I don't know about anybody else, how anybody's going to feel about it. But for me, it was great to go back to the Overlook. I would say that Rebecca, as Rose the Hat, is just an amazing, she's so beautiful and so evil, and she doesn't underplay, she doesn't overplay. It's like, hi there, she's great. How are you, handsome? She's wonderful, and it's a victory too for Mike's eye and the costume designer's eye that the hat is perfect. I had visualized a much higher hat, but what she wears is perfect. She is Rose the Hat.
One of the things that I believe very much about horror cinema in general is that your genre elements are only as strong as your characters. And that's something that I learned reading Stephen King for a lifetime. And one of the most rewarding aspects of kind of any movie is watching a character come to life. For something like this, these were characters that appeared in a certain way in your head when you worked on the novel. And you communicate them so beautifully on the page that I feel like they were very similarly represented in my imagination reading the novel. Rose the Hat, when I put the novel down, and I read it the weekend that it was released, I thought she was one of the most exciting and charismatic and fascinating antagonists that I'd read in a very long time. And I was so excited to see Rebecca bring that to life.
One of the things that works in this movie is that we see people that we can relate to as human beings, people who are friends, people who are caregivers, people who are protectors. And that's to a large extent what makes the scary parts scary.
When you use the words just horror, I always kick at that a little bit, because I think horror in general is, I love what you said about it being just one string on the guitar. It's what makes it cathartic. I think, is that it's a reflection, it's a reflective surface into which we can kind of safely examine the darker sides of the human experience. And you never would recognize darkness without light, for something to just be horror. I don't really understand. And one of the things I think that defines a Stephen King novel, and I hope defines the kind of movies that I'm interested in making, is that they're movies about being a human being, and they're movies about love and friendship and loss and some of the deepest fears that we have as, humans on this giant rock floating in space, but that they're ultimately meant to show us in equal measure the darkest it can be out there and kind of the apex of our positive potential as well. And I think that's why people gravitate so strongly to works like The Stand that are so clearly about human beings and how we fall into either of those categories often at the same time.
It のスティーブン・キングが仕掛ける最大の謎。呪われたホテルが目を覚ます。ドクター・スリープ。